Modern software development relies on rapid iteration and constant experimentation. When you introduce comprehensive legal regulation into that process, those two forces collide. Engineers and founders worry that the threat of massive administrative penalties will effectively halt experimental coding. The fear is that a single mistake during training could bankrupt a company long before its model is ever offered to the public. The European Union clearly anticipated this friction. Built directly into the text of the AI Act is a structural countermeasure, a designated safe harbor engineered specifically for the development phase. This framework is detailed in Chapter 24 of the regulation, establishing what is known as the regulatory sandbox. It operates as a controlled legal environment. Rather than placing a wall in front of developers, the regulation constructs a protected testing ground where experimental models can be built without triggering the law's most severe penalties. Looking at the blueprint of this law, under Article 57, every EU member state must establish an operational national regulatory sandbox. The legislation sets a hard deadline. These sandboxes must be active by August 2, 2026. To qualify for entry, developers have one overarching requirement. They must demonstrate they are testing and training their systems in good faith, adhering to the sandbox protocols. Once inside, developers receive explicit legal protection. The state guarantees that participating companies are shielded from administrative fines for non-compliance during the testing phase. Removing the immediate threat of regulatory fines changes the math for a startup. It allows engineering teams to test novel, high-risk architectures without risking the survival of their company. The sandbox boundary is highly specific in what it deflects. The protection only applies to administrative fines levied by state regulators. This shield does not grant absolute legal immunity to the developer. The AI Act preserves civil liability. While administrative fines bounce off the shield, a line representing civil liability passes straight through it. If a model causes actual harm, third parties retain their right to sue. The developer remains strictly accountable in civil court. When the testing phase concludes, formal exit requires a comprehensive report, detailing their methodology, the risks identified, and the test results. The sandbox serves as a highly structured proving ground. It suspends regulatory fines to encourage early-stage engineering, but maintains civil accountability to prevent careless deployment. Artificial intelligence faces a cold start problem. A model requires massive volumes of data to train effectively, but acquiring and processing that data legally is exceptionally difficult. Article 59 establishes a data pipeline, creating a legal pathway to reuse personal data for training within the sandbox. But this is strictly filtered. The AI must target a significant public interest, like improving healthcare, environmental protection, or energy grids. The law requires total technical isolation. Any personal data brought into the sandbox must be stored completely separate from standard operational systems. When the experiment concludes, the developer must execute a mandatory end-of-life protocol. Every piece of personal data used during testing must be permanently deleted. By linking technical isolation with strict public interest goals, Article 59 allows developers to utilize highly restricted personal data as an engineering resource while maintaining full compliance with underlying EU privacy laws. A purely artificial sandbox has a terminal limitation. At a certain point, a model designed for the real world must encounter real-world variables. Article 60 opens a legal pathway for conducting real-world testing outside the strict confines of the sandbox. But before an AI enters that space, Article 61 imposes an absolute prerequisite. Developers must obtain explicit, informed consent from the test subjects. The standard for this consent is precise. Subjects must clearly understand the experimental nature of the system they are interacting with. Furthermore, the law guarantees those subjects an irrevocable right to withdraw their consent at any time, without facing any penalty or loss of service. Real-world testing acts as the necessary bridge connecting theoretical compliance to actual market readiness, and the crossing is gated entirely by the consent of the user. Complex regulatory frameworks carry an inherent economic risk. They often favor well-funded corporations that can afford massive legal departments, inadvertently leading to regulatory capture. The AI Act uses Article 62 to counteract this advantage, legally guaranteeing that small and medium enterprises and startups receive priority access to the national sandboxes. This comes with a crucial economic lever. states must provide this placement entirely free of charge. The text goes even further for the smallest players, microenterprises, through Article 63. Article 63 mandates administrative simplifications, drastically reducing the procedural and paperwork burdens required for these smaller teams to enter and operate within the sandbox. By lowering the barrier to entry and subsidizing access, the regulation ensures innovation is not restricted to established tech monopolies. The architecture of Chapter 24 operates as a complete, integrated system. It provides legal safe harbor from administrative fines and establishes clear pipelines for the reuse of restricted data. It balances this with civil liability, rigorous exit reports, and strict consent for field tests. For smaller developers and technical leads, the perspective on the AI Act needs to shift. It is an infrastructure meant to be actively utilized. Tech startup founders have priority access to these legally mandated testing grounds designed expressly to accelerate their development cycles. The European Union built a structured, state-subsidized pipeline into the law itself, ensuring that companies have a viable, legally protected route to bring novel AI to the market.